Welcome back to Raising Truth Podcast. Thank you for coming back and joining us and supporting us so far. Thank you for listening in and tuning in and sharing. It has been a blessing to have the support and a blessing to continue to pour out whatever the Lord places on my heart. And today I have my husband finally joining me.
Cue the clap.
I told you guys he'll be here whether he likes it or not, so he's finally here. Let's give him another round of applause. But I want to continue to focus on all things marriage, family, household, kids, having those conversations that I pray will be helpful, and to continue to focus on just the ultimate example that Christ gives us in the Bible, but really bringing a real life application and real life examples and conversations. Again, I feel that sometimes, even if you might have these thoughts, struggles, or you wish somebody might, kind of give you the inside scoop, talk to you, sometimes people are just like afraid to acts or have these conversations, and sometimes it's much easier to like be at home on your phone and listen to somebody else talk about it than be like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, can you help me with that? Most people are not willing to come up to a fellow brother or sister in Christ, a fellow married couple, and talk about these things. It's just, we don't see that. I mean, I feel like in the Christian community it's almost a taboo, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it also comes with kind of like the pride of being a man. They let the man take over, the pride in the man take over, and it's like, oh, hey, I don't need help. Just because we're kind of raised with the status quo of a man has to be tough and have to be macho and all that. So I feel like that's what I feel.
I feel like that's a good point, even for the women, because sometimes women don't ask other women because they're concerned about their husbands. So that's a really good point. Sometimes it's not just the husband not wanting to reach out, but then the woman would stop herself from reaching out, oftentimes in protection of the man, because the husband is resistant to outside help. And then now the woman is so protected of the husband that they won't even reach out a fellow mom, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even just right, it's different. Like, we're not talking about where like another mom or a wife is hitting up, let's say, another husband, right?
Yeah, no.
Like, we're talking about just even moms and moms, like there's the fear and the resistance. So and we want to break that, because obviously the Lord tells us, like, we have our brothers and sisters in Christ there for the purpose of edification, fellowship. Like that, this is why it's so important to surround yourself with the solid foundation of Christian community and those that share the same vision and goals for your family. Like, that's also very important, because sometimes that person may not have or share that same vision or goal of what you want for your family. So in this case, and on my podcast, my focus is, when you continue to ground yourself in the ways of the Lord and how He set things up, you become a better person. And by you focusing on yourself, you become a better person. You become a better spouse first, and then ultimately a better parent. Like, it flows from you focusing on that, and then everything else flows from that. Today, I know I still wanted to focus. I know it's the holidays, don't want to get too heavy on certain things. But today I want to focus on just the subject of discipline, boundaries, right, for your children. And, the real theme and the focus is, you're still a good mom. You're still a good parent, even if you discipline your child and you put boundaries for your children in your household. A lot of times there's so much guilt, and there is guilt upon husbands, but I feel like it's so heavy on moms, because it's almost like because the mom ultimately gave birth to them, there's that very emotional kind of like connection to it, where it's now you're just like almost like sheltering, because you're like, oh my goodness, I feel things so strongly that you want to protect, but then that causes the mom guilt when there's boundaries that need to be placed, when there's discipline needed to, be put in place. And, I want to kind of help to dismantle that, that kind of stigma and that mentality that moms have, where it's like, oh my goodness, I feel like such a terrible mom. I mean, you might still feel that mom guilt, but you can't let it stop you, because we need to realize what the consequences ultimately of our actions are when we allow that. So the key is just not allowing that to take over ultimately what God designed for the household. I mean, the father ultimately shows that he disciplines us, his children, right? And what are the benefits of that? So we can't separate the two. Like, we can't separate God is our ultimately heavenly father. He disciplines us. We can't separate that from the way that we discipline and how we are.
Yeah, I agree.
And, oftentimes it becomes, just a mom thing. And I want to dismantle that too. And, it's not just a mom thing. The father indeed is necessary. The father is so necessary. And we see how evident that is, that the father's place in, especially, in this case, we're talking specifically about discipline. It's so evident. And, I want to truly focus on that part, because again, you're still a good mom and you're still a good parent, even if you discipline and have, boundaries put for your children. And if you allow your husband to also discipline and help you in that. So moms, we don't need to take the load all on ourselves. We can't allow our own mom guilt to get in the way of the very husbands that Christ has given us to assist in that part of being that, head and structure. We end up feeling burnt out in those ways because we're trying to do it, and we're trying to stop the husbands from fulfilling that role.
Yeah.
So first I want to go to Proverbs 22 verse 6. We always talk about this verse of, directing your children in the paths they should go, and they shall never, depart from it, right? But in the ESV version, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. So it doesn't just say, direct your child. And no, it says train. In the dictionary definition, it means to teach a particular skill or type of behavior through practice and instruction over a period of time. So it's not a one or two thing. It's over a period of time. But it also says a particular skill or type of behavior through practice and instruction. So it's not just one instant. It's over a period of time, and it's focusing on what particular skill or types of behavior. In this case, when we're talking about children, it's numerous skills and numerous types of behaviors. Back before I had my children, I was doing ABA therapy, so behavior therapist. And when we would collect our data, when we would work with in a specific case, a specific child, the behaviors would literally be laid out by detail. So like, depending on what skills they're being worked on. So it could literally be as simple as they wave hello, or they have eye contact, and then we have to mark how many times they actually look at you in the eyes. This is how specific we talk about behavior. And then now think about that when we think about kids and what they're capable of doing, not just in the present, but in the future. I want to almost bring it to when you think about, let's say, training even in I kind of want to pick at even like the law enforcement side. Like, what's the difference between, let's say, someone being taught something, right? Showing you something versus you actually training in a particular area.
So it's funny that you brought that up because first thing when you said training and now putting law enforcement into it. So when you're just being taught as far as just oh hey, I'm just gonna be taught something for within a 1 day span and that's it and it's not gonna be reoccurring. There's no retention. And when you're constantly training in something, you retain it a lot better, right? So there's this thing with muscle memory, right? They say when you do a certain thing or train in a certain thing for a certain amount of time, you develop muscle memory. That muscle memory is really just retention. You you retain it a lot better when you're doing it a lot more and you're more consistent with it. So in law enforcement, when we do defensive tactics, for example, which if all of y'all law enforcement, y'all know, y'all go into that Redmond drill. I just had to do mine, and it's intense. But when you do certain things like Redmond, like defensive tactics, like um, let's say takedowns, when you repeat it and you do it multiple times, then you become not a master at it, but it becomes muscle memory, and you retain it. So when the actual situation comes up, it's quick. It's a reaction instead of you digging through your files in your head like, oh, what was it that we did back 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and then you forget, and in that situation, you end up with the outcome of being hurt instead of winning in that situation.
Oh, that's a good point, and that's interesting that you bring that because even as I'm listening, and then it also it makes me think of like because you went through these trainings and all that, you developed what's considered the law enforcement mentality. So like
Mm-hmm.
the law enforcement mindset doesn't turn off because you've already been trained and built up a certain way. So we can be in any situation and I could be like la 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 and like, your mind will be thinking like, "Oh, did you even notice that person who was walking behind you? Did you notice the certain, exit that was like
Yeah,
questionable?"
I'm always getting on her for situational awareness. I'm like, you had none in this situation. Did you
um
not see it?
but that's a really good point because again, because you were put in the situations of being trained over time, you've built that law enforcement mentality that essentially helps you in the way you navigate life because
Mm-hmm.
you're already thinking a certain way. So that's the same way that we have to think about when we're thinking about our children. We want to train their mindset and how they approach situations to be in a certain way, again, to align in what we believe in. In this case is bringing all things back to Christ, right? And having a Christ-like mentality. But again, we need to again train them up in these specific skills and all that. So um, first of all, I want to just like abolish this whole, oh well, kids are kids, or for example, like boys, oh they're just boys, boys are boys.
Yeah, kids are kids and boys are boys to a certain extent, and that only applies to what you allow them to do. Because if you allow them to do certain things, that they'll believe, oh, that's the norm, because such and such allows this to happen. So I feel like even you guys, like let's say our kids would look at us like, hey, so and so allows this. Is that the norm? Is basically what they're doing when they ask like, oh, but so and so's mom allows them to do this, and that. Well, no, that's their norm, and that's up to them. But here in our house, that's not our norm. So I feel like it's like a certain stipulation, or let's say, yeah, let's just leave it as a stipulation where
I think
they
more
feel like,
characteristics to be, I guess, mindful of. Like
yeah,
like yes, kids are, because again, they are kids. So, right, kids are, immature. There's things they don't know. They're going to be silly. They're going to be wild. They're going to be testing boundaries. They're going to want to, if they have to release energy and they're, more hyper than another kid, they got, to release all that. Or for example, boys do tend to need that, kind of like that
physical expression.
Right. Yes. Like they need that excessive like output, like to release the energy and do things. Yes, it's more common, right? You'll see more common behaviors on girls versus boys, et cetera, et cetera. But we take that to the extreme of, we then allow kids to go beyond that and then just like do whatever they want, make their own choices, or do certain things that don't align. And then we're bothered because they start to exhibit these certain traits and these certain personality traits and behaviors because we've attributed it to kids are just kids. Oh, they're just being kids. Yes, okay, right? There is developmental things to keep in mind, right, for children versus adults, obviously, right? They're not adults. But we can't attribute everything to, well, kids are just kids. Oh, boys are just boys. Like, no, then you're taking away from the fact of what the Bible is saying to literally train up the child. Because it's not, just, if they're a girl, leave them, you got to do this certain thing. Or if they're a boy, you got to do. No, it's not saying that. It's saying to train up the child in the way that they should go. So if you have certain expectations of what you want them to do, then you need to be consistent and firm in the ways of which you're trying to get them to go. But again, there's that mom guilt of, there are feelings involved, right? All these certain things, and we allow it to get away into the discipline. But then we are too busy being consumed. We have a husband and a partner that's literally right there, right? They're also the parent, right? They're also the parent. You're not the only parent in the situation. And I'm talking specifically about like two-parent households, all right? Because single parent household, that's a whole other ball game. Yep. Because you're carrying the load by yourself, right? In that case, obviously you will seek other people to help you, right? Because it does take a village regardless, right? And if you're a single parent, it does take an even greater village, right, to have that help. So in that case, you should seek someone that you obviously trust and value to help you, right? But in this specific sense, I'm focusing on the two-parent, in this case, if anything, it's like a two-parent household acting like a one-parent household, but it's a two-parent household of two people who are married, but for some reason when it comes to the children, it's like all of a sudden this is a one-parent household.
There's a divide, yeah.
And again, that's not godly. That's not how he wants. And not only that, but now it's more work. Again, it's more work on you, mom, because you're trying to carry the load and do it all by yourself and not allowing your husband, who's right there, you can allow him to help and value his opinion and everywhere else. But why does it change when it comes to children? There is that motherly aspect, that emotional part. Yeah, I get it. But then you're carrying the load more. You're not honoring literally the blessing that essentially God gave you to be able to have that partnership and that help, right? So use that. Follow what Christ is telling you and honor the example that he set. Like, listen, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and like I literally am just like, oh, daddy's home, I'm clocking out.
Yeah.
Peace. I'm gonna go take a shower, I'm gonna do the things, I'm gonna do it. Like, that's it. Come deal with your crazy kids that I've been dealing with all day. Come handle them. If I got to give a report, like they did this, that, and the third, and just letting you know, this is how they've been so far. So you already got the inside scoop of what like you're walking into. But, I don't understand of just like that trying to carry it all. Like, no, I understand. And I think it's interesting because I didn't grow up with a father. So it's just interesting how I guess God has switched my mindset because, oftentimes women who didn't grow up with that fatherly discipline, they have a harder time, like
letting go.
Right. And, letting go of that control and then also accepting, like a man speaking to them. Right. And therefore it could be triggering when the man is speaking to, like the children, like seeing the father speaking to the children a certain way, it's triggering because it's like you never had someone, like your father, right, speaking to you and in a certain manner, right, like that discipline, that manly discipline. So it becomes like that whole thing. So it's quite interesting how I guess God has worked with me, because I don't have that problem where I'm just like, oh, I don't want you to discipline our kids. Like, no, I'm like, I value it. I'll be like, come speak to your children because they need to be spoken to right now. Because I know in that moment, like I'm not it.
Well, I kind of want to tie that back to when we was in church and we was talking about frequency, and I feel like it's the tone in the man's voice that the kids are like,
The male
okay,
frequency.
like the deep tone is like, oh, all right, let me straighten up, because if not, I'm gonna hear all that bass coming out of dad's voice, and I don't want to deal with that.
I know, and he's always making fun of my voice. So, but it's funny though, because my little one, she's something else, and like she's always laughing. She came out like her dad. She's a goofball, and she always got a face, and she thinks it's funny. So I literally am like with her, like when I'm like, girl, like it's not funny. Like I actually find myself at one point switching, well, almost like adjusting my tone in a way so that she knows I mean business. If you don't listen to me right now, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding around with you. It's not funny. But she kind of, the funny thing is though, she knows like, no, she walk away because she knows. She's like, what was that about? I don't know what that was about, but I'm gonna walk away and listen because I don't know what that was about, Mom. But it's true. There is that need, but we see that so evident when, God talks about, the husband and his role and all this. He doesn't take away from the woman. Like he establishes that the man has to be understanding, that he has to love his bride. Like he's not taken away from those aspects. So we can't confuse the two. We can't allow the husband's tone or influence and discipline to be almost like what's the word, like make us feel a certain way, right? We can't allow that because it is necessary, right? It is very necessary. And again, going back to what I was saying, even like with women who did not grow up with their fathers, it is necessary in how they respect and receive authority when they get older. Because again, going back to what does the training mean? It means over a period of time. So what's going to happen if you are laid back on the authority and laid back on the discipline and don't allow your husband to partner with you in that? Then what happens? They're going to have an issue with authority. They're going to have an issue with authority. Because anybody who speaks a certain way that's not, loving, passive, or it comes with a certain structure and authority and command, right away they're like, it makes them like emotionally they break down. Emotionally they can't handle it. Like they crumble. Like that's it. Like it's just like, like they just kind of disappear inside themselves.
Or even like going further than that, they'll have an issue with men.
Right.
Because if you don't allow the father to show what a man really is and instill that principle of what a man is supposed to be like, what a father is supposed to be like, then they'll in the future they'll go and they'll have issues with men, and it'll grow on to be an issue where they can't they have issues even like sustaining a man or even providing love and care and all of that for a man because they don't understand the value of a man in their life.
I feel like you're attacking me right now.
No,
but we weren't going to get into that in this episode because we were going to talk about, young marriage and what that was like, getting married real young. But just as a snippet, it's true because, I mean, he was just talking about me. It's okay. You could say that. But that was literally me. I was like, even it's weird because this is how you know the power of it, because it's like, I knew I was going to be with you forever. Like, I knew that was it. And I think that was the resistance of like, man, I'm not trying to even give you a chance because I know if I give you a chance, that's it. Like, I knew that. But at the same time, One, I've already been hurt, and then, you know, like men issues and all that stuff. And then I have, like, you know, not at that point I never knew my father. Like, I never met him. You know, he wasn't in the picture, so I didn't have that, like, you know, father figure. So I did approach relationships in that way, but I approach it from one side was, you know, hurt, like defensive, like I'm not gonna let you hurt me. So I'm just like gonna deflect, and everything is like kind of protecting myself. But then the other side is not valuing, and then having that, like, I'm independent, so like I don't need you to take care of me. I don't need you to do anything for me. Why are you even doing that? Like, I don't need you to do none of that for me. I'm like, I could do it myself, you know, little Miss Independent. I don't need help. And you know, even for the simplest things, it was like everything was very defensive, even though in the natural there was nothing wrong with what you were doing or how you were approaching, but it was overwhelming to the little girl inside me, you could say, the little girl who didn't have the father. And it's like, oh, that's a lot right now. Until I learned how to receive it, accept it, then it's like, okay, that was the beginning of the healing process of beginning to accept and receive. And then once that healing starts to happen, then you start to essentially, obviously, value it. Like, that's the outcome of it. But again, because of that, what am I going to do with, you know, God decided to give us 2 daughters? And I was just like, the first thing I thought was, I like cried, because all I thought was all the stuff that I've been through. Like, oh my God, I don't want my girl to go through any of it. So I'm going to, you know, approach it a certain way, where now I'm just like, now that I have 2 daughters, it completely shifted, because now I'm like, okay, I want them to understand, like, you do, like, you have a dad, like, this is your dad. You are respecting, you know, you're respecting mommy, and you're
Especially
respecting
that
daddy.
little one. Yeah.
Like, well, the little one's obsessed with me, but I make sure, like, no, like, daddy is here too. He can help you. Not only that, but you will, like, listen to him. Like, it's me and him. Like, I'm very almost like really like making sure I establish, like, I'm not taking daddy out the picture. I'm not saying, oh, making decisions where it's like, you're not involved. We're very like, no, not, go ask mommy. Mommy says something else that, like, no, we're like,
and it's great, because that's kind of something that, like, we always talk about it. We've had a family that had told us back when we were about to have Layla, and they were like, listen, the one biggest piece of advice that we have for you that stuck with us the whole time was, before they were born, there was always us. We came first before they were born. So we're not gonna allow the the children to divide us, because we built this before we built that.
amen. But it's true. The number one thing the enemy is going to use is the children, because the child changes everything. I mean, it turns the mom into a whole different person. And then what happens, the first thing, it's like, all of a sudden your husband is like the worst enemy, because you're like, oh, protecting this baby, and like, no, don't speak to them that way. No. Yes, sometimes I'm like, you know, to him, I'm like, you're speaking to them a little strongly, like, I'm gonna need you to calm down a little bit, like, that's a little bit much. But I'm not gonna allow for all of a sudden my child to diminish his authority. Like, I'm very like, I'm like, that is unacceptable. I don't like that. First of all, I don't like seeing when other kids do it, because I'd be like, no, that's your dad, that's your mom. That's not your BFF. That's not your bro, your sissy, your no, like, that's mom and that's dad. Like, very respectful in that. But not to get too off course, let me read Ephesians chapter 6 from verse 1. Children, obey your parents, because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them. Rather, bring them up with discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So the promise is there, right? There's what's the outcome, right, of that? Things will go well for you and you will have a long life on earth. So because there's this promise, there's the weight of following that instruction. So the weight of following that instruction is to have this outcome. Now, what does it say? Okay, fathers, you're not going to be just reckless. No, but rather bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So ideally is to trust and allow that your husband hears from the Lord. Like at the end of the day, like what's the source of you not allowing them to discipline, like, or even be in consultation with you with the decisions you make, right? It's ultimately like you're saying to your spouse, like, I don't value and I don't trust that you're hearing or following the Lord. And if that's the case, then there's a whole ripple effect of what essentially comes with that. Like, not even just regarding the children, but that's it. Like, if you're already coming with that mentality, then I mean, you might as well just say the household is just in the crumbling, like it's just on its way down, like
in a downward motion.
Right, exactly. Like it's already coming down because you're approaching with that mentality. If you're approaching with that mentality, then like that's it. Like, what else can you do at that point if you're already saying, well, I don't trust that you hear from the Lord. I don't trust that you can guide them effectively, that you have that mindset. If that's the case, first of all, you know who you married, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know who you you know who you married. Like, it's not like I can sit here and say, oh, I didn't know who I married. Yes, you know, obviously from then till now, when you've been married for so many years, obviously we're not the same people.
Yeah, things change.
Right? But the very essence of who you are and who essentially believe in, that's the part that needs to be trusted. It's the very essence of who the person is. And even if certain things maybe you don't agree with or maybe should be shifted, that's a discussion to happen behind the scenes, not with the child present, first of all. But that is a conversation worth having with your spouse. Is like, okay, how do you want to go about these things? Like, how do you want to do things? And I feel like that's a conversation that oftentimes maybe it's not had. It's the lack of that conversation behind the scenes that then triggers into having that single parent mentality, even though you're very much married and in a committed marriage, 2-parent household. But when it comes to the kids, it's like, oh, a single parent. And it's like, okay, let's go back. Team meeting.
Yeah.
Team meeting. Let's huddle and talk about things. And I feel like essentially if you don't have those conversations, then things are not going to go well, because it's going to become a very team I versus this team here. And for me, I didn't grow up in a Christian household, so there's a lot of things that I had to kind of be like, okay, I don't want it to look like this. I want this and that and the third. And it was kind of like that realization of, okay, like, how can we make sure that this is like good and like strong in the things of Christ and all this? Like, how can we maintain that? Not only that, but for us, we're very much active in ministry, so that adds like a whole nother level of like how we're gonna handle parenting, right? Because we're actively involved in ministries. God has a call on my life, but he also very much has a call on his life, right? So it's not like, oh, one is bigger than the other, one is hindering the other. No, it's how can we navigate parenting and still honor the call, right? And that's a whole other conversation, but that is another dynamic, again, to have in that team huddle. But I just, as we're wrapping up, because I don't want to get into like all the other topics that we can possibly go into, because there are other topics and things that I want to tackle, right? And but as I was reading my Bible, I have a study Bible, and it has all these you know, things and notes. And as I happened to come across this note, I was like, this is so good. So I just thought to read it because part of that, like, mom guilt can also come from still that struggling with the submission sub submission part of it.
Mm.
um where like when it comes, you have that mama bear mentality where you're like, now you had no, you might have maybe not have had a problem like being like, oh yeah, whatever you want, but then all of a sudden the kid comes into play and it's like, I'm a mama bear now. It's like,
Roar.
hear me roar. Like, no. Like, is what I say. But no, like, it doesn't shift because kids come in the picture. Like, the outline of the household doesn't change just because kids come in the picture. Like, no, the roles that Christ established of like how the man, the woman should be, it still exists. But I like the breakdown that my Bible put of like what submission means, and then it broke it down into actually like the purposes for submission. Like there's functional, there's relational, there's reciprocal, and then there's universal submission. But the general definition of submission is voluntarily cooperating with someone. First out of love, and second out of respect for God, and then out of love and respect for that person. So I thought that was so amazing because voluntarily cooperating. Like that's what marriage is. It's like there's compromise. There's, like you don't just enter it with my way or the highway, otherwise the marriage is not going to work. And then we bring the godly definition of, the word, you having to submit. We think of it as this like inferior thing. Like, no, it's very humbling to be able to voluntarily cooperate with someone. Why? Because you love them. You value that God placed them in your life, and then again, the purposes for it, right? For example, in this case, functional purpose of submission. In this case, distinguishing of the roles and the work that we are called to do in order to be effective. So in order to be effective, I have to acknowledge that I have my role, you have your role, I have, what I'm called to do a certain thing, and then you have to do, called to do a certain thing. And it's acknowledging that those calls can work together to be able to effectively parent and discipline. So it's like, in order to reach the goals with the children and keep your peace in your household and, all these things, is acknowledging that. Like, and an example, as we close out here, how did it change for you when it came to all of a sudden coming to the realization, like, wow, I have like really two girls. Like, I'm in a house full of women. I got two girls to be responsible for. How did that change? Coming from a house that
Full of boys.
full of boys.
Yeah.
Okay. So God is funny. And I came actually from a house full of girls. So
So I feel like it taught me to somewhat soften my approach when it comes to life in general, because not just with you, but the girls kind of taught me to be calmer in certain things because they're kind of fragile, if you want to say that. And my natural nature is to be loud, to be expressive, and even when I discipline them in certain times, I'll look back and see like, oh, okay, I kind of overdid it. Let me go now and show them that a man can also be apologetical. And I'll go and hug them and say, hey, I'm sorry that I was so loud. I'm sorry that I might have done it the wrong way. But you need to understand that this, and that is the reason why maybe I was a little bit too loud, but you need to understand that this is the essence of what I meant, when I was talking, at the end of the day, it doesn't say that I don't love you. It shows you that I do love you because I'm correcting you. And then I'll quote scripture because, our kids, the way that we've raised them and we're raising them, they understand certain scriptures and they understand what it means to do things the right way in God's eyes. So I can
And they will
literally,
ask.
yeah, and they will ask, especially Layla, my oldest. She
Very
will ask.
intuitive.
She'll ask a question. Okay, so then what does that mean, and what does God think about that? So it taught me to kind of take a step back before I speak.
I think that's a good point in, again, bringing down the mom guilt, and like the two can coexist. Like you can be loving, you can offer apologies when necessary, right? You're not apologizing for the boundaries that you're putting in place. You may apologize if you approach the wrong way, right? We're talking about our own like self-control and our own emotions, but not for putting the boundaries in place putting them in place in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? You're not apologizing for parenting, right? For being the one to establish the rules. Like they do need to be clear in, okay, it's not their way, right? But yes, there is a way to go about it. And it's okay to speak with with your spouse, if their mannerisms might bother you, and you might be like, okay, like, let's fix that. Like, it is okay to have those conversations with them. But if we shut them out completely, then we are not only operating unbiblical, right? But we're also we're stifling if that's the right word for it, the command that was put, the calling that was put on the husband's life to do these things. And then not only that, but we're hurting our children because we're hindering that training aspects. Like how you were saying, there's different types of training for certain things, right? There's all these aspects. Okay, so now we're gonna we're missing out from our kids. We're hurting their opportunity to have that helpful training, that very important part of their training, right? So to speak. We cannot hinder that. We need to, like, you're still a good mom for having clear boundaries, for setting the discipline in your household, and you're still a good mom if you allow your husband to help you. Like, they're there for a reason. And again, don't carry all the load, right? So if you're stressed for no reason when your husband is there willing, but you're not allowing him, like, no, like, it is biblical to allow him to help. Like, you can't like be like, oh, well, no, you gotta like, no, again, trusting that they hear from the Lord, trusting that, again, first of all, it's their child too. So it's not like they, love them less, like, or something, they want, like, no, if they have the same goals, then why don't you trust them? It's their child too, right? What are the goals? Loving your children, making sure they're growing healthy and strong. And then also, the other goals that you set within your household, right? Like certain things that you allow, don't allow. If those goals are clear and outlined, right? Like, we allow these things, we're not going to allow these things. Like, come up with that first, then allow your husband help, because you're sharing in that, like, okay, these are the things that we're going to allow. These are the things that we don't want to allow, right? Now, okay, we know. So that way, now we're operating on one accord. Okay, it's going to look differently in the way that I may do things and in the way that he does things. But at the end of the day, I can't overmanage of, like, how you're going to come about certain things, as long as we're meeting the same goal together. Sometimes it's going to be necessary for me to handle it or handle a certain way, and then others that's needed. Like, we can't take away one or the other. And being that, going back to this this season, right? Let's remember that we're in the holiday season. Again, moms are usually also the ones like scrambling for Christmas and doing all of that stuff and all that. But again, don't forget, right? If you're married, you have a partner right there, and you're hindering him from being able to help you, right, in these things, right? So let's work as a team. Let's allow the gift that God gave us to be able to have a spouse, right? To have that help, and to allow that authority and that outline back into the household. And we need to be able to bring that back. We see a lot of other stuff going on right now, and then ultimately the children are hurting. The generation are hurting because they're walking into this harsh world without a sense of authority. They can't take authority. They can't take direction. They live in this world thinking that they're like walking into the world like if they're untouchable, like nothing can happen to them. I mean, he could tell you. I mean, he worked in the schools in the Bronx for a long time, and he's seen he's seen craziness. But again, it's evidence of when there's the lack of that in the household. These kids are walking into the world blind and unprepared. Let's prepare them. Not coddle, not them already see like, okay, you're married, but I can see like kids are not kids are very smart. They pick it up. They know if like, okay, well, mommy don't listen to daddy, and okay, so it's not so all right. So well, mommy, this, that, and the third, like already that's starting out. So let's cut that out. Let's bring it back.
Hold them accountable.
Right. Let's bring it back and do things God's way. You have anything else you want to add?
No, I was just gonna say it's just hold them accountable for their actions. Really, the kids. I mean, since you said about me being in New York and being an officer over there with the kids, one thing I always used to say to the kids is, we're not doing this because we want to. We're only doing what you are making us do, because at the end of the day we are
What
reacting.
your actions are giving.
Yeah, we are reacting to your actions, right? And if your actions decide that you need to be taught a lesson and taken down to the precinct, then that's exactly what we did, and I'll just leave it there.
Well, that's a good place to end. And I can say in the terms of motherhood, our actions will give us burnout and stress. So let's combat that by allowing your husband to aid in the structure and the discipline in your household. And again, you are still a good mom and a good spouse.
And a good parent.
A good parent for, walking in that obedience of that what God has set. So we're going to leave it there because there is so much other things that we can talk about, but we just wanted to give that snippet and that focus and hopefully that encouragement, especially walking into the pressures of the holiday season and all that could come with it. We want to make sure that parents, spouses are feeling empowered, are feeling connected, are feeling like a team managing and walking through this season, that they walk in, one accord. And we pray that over you, that you have that, that you reunite. If you're not feeling distant and you're feeling separated, come together again, have those necessary conversations and, get on one accord again, because again, your household needs it. Your household needs you both. So thank you again for tuning in. Don't forget to share, subscribe as, continue to dive into these topics. And we pray that it continues to be helpful, encouraging, and empowering to manage your house and your life in the way that God intended. So see you next time
on Raising Truth Podcast.